In Costa Rica is sure a heck of a lot more gratifying, fun, and interesting if you understand the culture and you're able to fit in here. Good evening, folks. It's Wednesday night again. Another 7 days have passed, and that means it's time for our live Costa Rica chat with Costa Rica Matt. Tonight, I'm continuing on a series of videos talking about some simple, practical Costa Rica culture tips to empower anyone who's considering moving to Costa Rica to learn more about what's going on around them. But more than anything, I want to help you look just a little bit more like you belong here when you get down. And also, I want to help people get an understanding when they see or hear other things out there, what's actually happening here in Costa Rica. Tonight, we're going to start off with an exciting trip to a restaurant where we'll talk about important restaurant vocabulary as well as some of the etiquette around how restaurants work here. Second of all, we're going to go over hand gestures. And I know what you might be thinking about that. Yes, there is a very commonly used hand gesture that I bet a lot of people thought that this referred to. But no, I want to give you some very particular hand gestures that people in Costa Rica use. Third, I want to go over quickly how it was appropriate to greet people here in Guanacaste before COVID. The rules have obviously changed, especially with this particular greeting. And fourth, I want to go over a couple etiquette items, especially talking about personal space here in the country, parking lots and how things work there. And finally, we're going to go over some key phrases to try and help you expand your vocabulary in ways that are actually meaningful and will help you sound like someone who belongs here. Again, my name is Matt Rosensteel. I'm the owner-broker of Latitude 10 Realty here in Playa Junquial, Guanacaste, Costa Rica. If you haven't already done so, be sure to hit that subscribe button, not only so that you can get updates about all these wonderful informative videos, but you'll be poised to see those amazing real estate deals that we publish every now and then again. Tonight, again, we're going over some Costa Rica culture tips to try and help you seem a little bit more like a local and fit in here. Thanks very much for joining me, and stay tuned. Folks, thank you very much for joining me. I'm Matt Rosensteel with Latitude 10, hoping to give you some tips that will empower you and actually give you a better understanding of Costa Rica culture and a few aspects of living here. First off, I want to start out with an exciting field trip, some real shock reporting. We went out into the field to show you just what it's like at a Costa Rica restaurant, and specifically to give you an idea of some of the vocabulary that you'll need to go out to a Costa Rican restaurant and some of the etiquette involved in restaurants here. Let's go to our trip to Lochitos, one of Playa Junquial's finest restaurants. We're here live at Lochitos, one of Junquial's great restaurants. One of the coolest things about Costa Rica is that a huge percentage of restaurants here are small family-owned places. If you're hoping to go to tons of McDonald's and Applebee's, large chains, that just doesn't really happen here. And you can see, from our surroundings that your typical community restaurant can often just be an outdoor space. This is called sort of a rancho. We're getting ready to order here. I'm going to go quickly over the menu to give you a quick idea of what you'll be looking at, and so you can see what's available. This is a nice bilingual menu that they have here. Importantly, in Costa Rica, you always need to notice whether or not the service charge is included in the price, because I do see people get frustrated feeling like the prices listed here don't correspond to what you get on the menu. And that's because in Costa Rica, there should be a 10% service charge that they split as sort of the tips. And in addition to this 10%, there will be a 13% sales tax. So for example, on a menu that does not include the service, we're going to be looking at a total 23% higher than these prices listed here. Here is our helpful restaurant owner, Doña Mercedes. Muchísimas gracias por atendernos.
Mucho gusto, bienvenidos de nuevo al restaurante Los Chitos. Estoy lista para que ordenen su comida y sus bebidas.
Excelente. One of the key phrases that I want people to understand is regálame. There are thousands of different forms of verbs and phrases that you'll hear, Mexican versions, and from all over Latin America, people might say things differently, but one of the most comfortable ways to ask for something at a restaurant here is to say regáleme, which is really asking give me or gift me, and it sounds like it's being forceful, but really if you want to sound somewhat like a local here in Costa Rica, you could say porfa regálame el ¿qué iba a pedir?
Pollo saltado.
El pollo saltado. I get a special dish here. Anne-Marie?
Sí, para mí la pasta camarón.
Pasta camarón.
Ah,
El pollo saltado viene con ensalada, papas naturales.
excelente. Muchísimas gracias.
gusto.
Y para los niños es el casado de pescado.
Casado de pescado. Mucho gusto, doña Ana María. ¿La pasta camarón la quiere blanca o la quiere roja?
Sí, salsa blanca, por
Casado de pescado, que es arroz, frijoles desde nuestra tierra de Costa Rica, maduro, ensalada y el pescado es dorado, muy buen pescado fresco.
Excelente. Muchísimas gracias, doña Mercedes.
Mucho gusto y para
Sí.
tomar, ¿qué les regalo?
Voy a tomar agua.
Agua, don
Agua.
Mateo, agua.
Agua
Con lim-
también,
con
porfa,
limón,
con
sí.
limón.
Ok, con mucho gusto.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas
Con
gracias.
permiso.
Propio.
Propio.
Anne-Marie used a different form there that's actually far easier than regálame. You can just say para mí and then name the plate that you want, or para los niños to express for me or for the kids, please this. So anyhow, some quick restaurant vocabulary there. Another interesting phrase as Mercedes was leaving, con permiso. That's how you politely ask to leave a table, or really how you should excuse yourself from any situation. So she said con permiso, saying I'm headed out now, and the proper response is to actually say propio, which means yours, or so if you wanted to literally translate it, it would be with your permission, con permiso, and the response being it's yours. And here is our casado. As we said, rice and beans are the mainstays, obviously, here in Costa Rica. A casado should also have a vegetable in here. They've got a salad. This is plantain. They take very ripe plantain and fry it a bit. Yeah, you can see Daniel is just too anxious to start here. And their beautiful portion of fish. So that's a casado. You guys ready? And now that the food has arrived, another very important phrase here, buen provecho, or enjoy. You can just say provecho, is how you would tell everybody, the polite thing to say right before you all start eating. And as a quick plug for Los Chitos here, if you're not entirely into just pure Costa Rican food, they also do a lot of other dishes like my chicken here, the shrimp pasta, that are not at all just standard Costa Rican fare, but very, they've got a great diversity of stuff here. So anyway, buen provecho. So it's time to square up the bill, and now the question becomes, do you tip? And you hear a lot of people in Costa Rica who say, that 10% service charge should be my tip. And in theory, that should get distributed to waiters and waitresses, but you frequently find here in Costa Rica that no, the boss keeps that 10% service charge, and waiters and waitresses might not actually see it. Second of all, I think that you'll find the price of your dinner here is going to be so affordable if you've eaten at one of these local small places that really, if you can't find it in your heart to tip, God help you. So anyhow, one more point that I want to make is that in Costa Rica, it's not rude at all. If you're in a hurry, for example, you've got a YouTube program that's starting in about 45 minutes and you need to edit a video about a restaurant before you start broadcasting, here it's completely polite to signal for the staff and ask them, me regala la cuenta, por favor. Regálame la cuenta, por favor. Not rude to ask for it, so we can get moving, and we'll go ahead and add on that tip and everything. So this was Lochitos tonight. And here's my point exactly. We just got the check. We had the beautiful fish casado that our kids split. I got a pollo saltado, which was the chicken dish, and my wife had shrimp in a white sauce with pasta, and the total tab is $32. So you can sure bet we'll be adding on a tip to that. All right, thank you very much for joining us on that trip out to dinner. We'll try and include more field trips like that in future broadcasts. And thank you very much to the fine folks at Lochitos for another spectacular dinner. Hopefully I don't have any of it in my teeth right now. Let's move on to hand gestures here in Costa Rica as a way to help people understand and gesture appropriately. First, I want to mention, having lived here for 14 years, I can't recall a single occasion that I've seen someone flip the bird to somebody else, even when they're angry or when it might be appropriate between people who actually wanted to flip the bird. That's saying something. I don't know whether or not that means it's just a completely unused gesture, or maybe giving the bird, flipping people off is so offensive that it would automatically result in a fight. But to be honest, I've never seen it here. And even if I were jokingly trying to say to somebody, F you in a friendly kind of way, I absolutely wouldn't use my middle finger here in Costa Rica because, again, I have not seen it in 14 years of living here. Let's talk about some more hand gestures so that you can look like a real local. And the first one, when you're deciding to go out to eat or you want to tell people, hey, I'm going to go eat something, is a great gesture to signal your intention. And you'll see in Guanacaste, this part of Costa Rica, the northwestern province, that, you finish a job and it's time to eat lunch and you can say, or if people ask, where are you going? You can literally just reply as, I'm going to eat and go grab something. Another hand gesture, and this is advanced. If you do this with a Guanacaste Costa Rican, they're going to really think that you know what you're doing and that you've been here for a long time. When anybody's about to play soccer, or when there's a game on, or when you want to just, talk about the fact that soccer's cool, this gesture, I'm going to go play soccer, is one that you'll see a lot in this rural area among people who are about to play soccer or whatever. Again, like this, a foot hitting a ball. If you were talking about the big game last night, or maybe you're about to go watch a soccer game, you can use that to really impress people and say, I'm headed to this. Another very advanced hand gesture that I want to teach people that you actually don't see quite often, but when a Guanacaste Costa Rican wants to suggest that somebody is cheap, this is the gesture they use, which means you're actually calling someone codo, which is your elbow, or tacaño, which is basically cheap. I guarantee you will get a huge laugh out of Costa Ricans. If you're in a situation you want to call somebody, oh, they're cheap, they would never pay for that, and go, like this. That's another one. You really don't see that often, but if you were able to spring it on somebody, really, you'd get a lot of pleasant reaction because they'd know you're sort of an advanced expat. Another thing in general in hand gestures, here in Costa Rica, you would see some gestures that might be considered impolite in the US or Canada, and specifically, Costa Ricans feel comfortable beckoning to their friends and saying, come over here, in sort of what we might feel to be kind of a forceful, a way that honestly a lot of Americans shy away from doing. You might see, for example, somebody pull up in front of your house in a car and make that gesture like, come on over here. And your first reaction as an American or Canadian might be, don't you pull up to my house and tell me to come over here. But culturally here, that's absolutely acceptable. And you do frequently see that people, will try and get you to come to them rather than walking across the room, etc. And it is, again, culturally acceptable with it, where they'll stay in their place and use this hand gesture to signal that they want you to come over to where they are. Costa Ricans don't just have hand gestures. There are also a couple mouth gestures that you see, and specifically in Guanacaste, you might be shocked to see someone do this to indicate a direction. And if you see it from the outside, it can very easily look like they're making a kissing motion or something that's kind of suggestive. But when you talk to Guanacastecos, if they're talking, where did this or that happen, they will frequently point with their lips and say, it happened over there. You'll also see a very expressive, you've noticed when I was doing this, some of these hand gestures come accompanied along with sort of the mouth gesture of, suggesting with your face. So if you do see someone making this sort of motion, don't necessarily get offended. They could just be pointing something out to the friend that they're talking to. Let's move on to greetings in our area of the country, especially prior to COVID. And one of the things that people don't and can't do anymore is a kiss on the cheek, which in Guanacaste really was the standard greeting when when a woman was involved in the greeting. Two men do not do the kiss on the cheek here. A man and a woman can, or two women definitely do. And what's important to know, someday we will have this back. We're at March 23rd here, and we're only about a week away from them taking away mask mandates. I think soon people will be doing this greeting again. And it's important to note, I wish I had video of this happening, when people kiss each other on the cheek and do this gesture here, you're not actually making lip contact with the skin of the other person. And in fact, when you meet some expats who actually kiss your cheek, it's the weirdest feeling in the world. Instead, the kiss on the cheek that I'm talking about, you actually put your right cheek against the person you're saludando or meeting and greeting, and you make a kissing noise off to the side so they can hear you did that, and that's the appropriate thing, a little, but do not put your lips on their face. And when you come to Guanacaste, someday when we're touching and interacting again, you're gonna see that people put their cheeks together like that, make a small kissing noise, and it's one kiss. You're always on right cheeks, or at least I don't think I've ever met somebody who does it on the left. And that small kissing noise just to complete the gesture would be the standard way you greet people in Guanacaste when there isn't a gigantic virus affecting how we act. Now, another thing to note when you're greeting people here and you do this kiss, Guanacastecos in general are far more comfortable touching other people than you might see in the US or Canada. This kiss can come accompanied by you putting your hands on their shoulders or a good handshake, or even sort of a semi-hug. But in general, you'll see that people here touch each other at a much more friendly level than what you might see in the US or Canada, in that standoffish, sort of my body, my personal space. Love the joke, Steve. Lip service. Way to go. If I had a prize tonight, you would win for the cleverest comment so far. Let's move on a little bit further to etiquette. A couple points I wanted to discuss. First of all, regarding personal space in Costa Rica. This is another thing that has changed dramatically during COVID, but in 2018, if you would have moved down here and stood in line at the bank or at the butcher shop, you might have been shocked at how little personal space Costa Ricans provide or establish when they're waiting in lines. And it can be, I'm somebody who really doesn't like to stand in lines and have that tension of everybody waiting and filing up. But really, where you might think in the US, you have, even prior to COVID, you always gave 2 or 3 feet personal space to everybody in a line or in a room, or, whenever you're in a situation with a bunch of people. Here, before COVID, it was absolutely different. And you saw a lot of times that expats might be very uncomfortable because what's culturally appropriate here would make you feel a little bit too close and intimate. And to me, it's always important to remember, yes, we feel that we have our rules for personal space for a reason. We feel that all of our norms and the way that we have, our etiquette is the way things should be because it makes sense. But in interpreting all of Costa Rica, you're going to be happiest if you come with the lens of thinking of everything really as something that you need to understand and adapt to. Many times I've had to get out of lines and just wait at the back, because in that same situation, not only is there no personal space, but if any movement forward happens and you're not right on top of it, you will see that cutting happens a bit more frequently in Costa Rica. And you will see that everybody is really pushing, and that sort of nervous energy to get to the front of the line might be something that you really weren't accustomed to in other parts of the world. Let's go on to a bit of car etiquette, and we're going to go back to hand gestures, I'm realizing. But first of all, there's an entire culture around cars in Guanacaste, and this is a place where you will still see a good number of hitchhikers standing out by the road. They're waiting for a bus, or they would have to wait for a bus if they don't get a ride from somebody. But because we're still a very small rural area, and in general, our communities are only 500 or 600 people at a maximum, you do see a lot of people hitchhiking and a lot of people giving them rides. As you're driving around Costa Rica, you'll see people with their thumb out. And a couple things I want to explain is that, first of all, it's polite to reply with a hand gesture and to give them a clear idea of why you're not going to pick them up if that's your decision. If you see a hitchhiker and you don't want to pick them up, you've got 2 options. First of all, you can just wag your finger. And in fact, I've done that with people I know. And it simply says, I'm not picking you up. It sets the expectations so that they're not hopping and, really trying to get you to stop as you drive by. And as someone who's hitchhiked a ton in Costa Rica, you see it a bunch, and it's actually a nice courtesy because you see that person is not going to pick me up. I can keep walking or go about my business. Your other hand gesture, and this might be, I think this is offensive in a certain part of the world, but if you want to tell the person that you can't pick them up because your car is full, this is the gesture, and you can do it as you drive by. You don't have to move back and forth. I hope Google doesn't recognize that as an offensive gesture on my YouTube channel. But if you just want to say, hey, my car's full and I can't pick you up, just do this. That's another gesture. You can use it in other contexts to suggest something that was absolutely full. If you went to a Ricky Martin concert that was jam-packed, you could say in Spanish, el concierto fue así. It was like this, just full of people. In any way, you'll see it on the road as hitchhikers ask you for a ride, or if you're ever in that situation in hitchhiking, people will come by and say, we're full. There's actually a third gesture you can use when you're responding specifically to hitchhikers. And if you point like this, you're saying, no, I'm turning soon, so I'm not a useful ride to you. That can work great as a semi-fib if you don't want to be just straight up and say, no, I'm not picking you up. If you're not honestly full, you can say, no, I'm sorry, I'm turning just down the road, so it wouldn't be worth it to pick you up. It's funny, I've ended up, hitchhiking doesn't seem like it would be a huge part of life, but if you drive around here for a few weeks, you will have these interactions or people asking you for a ride. Another thing about driving here, and one of the little quirks of Costa Rica culture that I think is one of the best things in the world, is that in parking lots, you will frequently have complete strangers help you back out or just try to do something to facilitate you driving around. And in fact, that doesn't just apply to parking lots. That applies pretty much everywhere where, especially in Guanacaste, our rural province, if you're backing out of a difficult situation in a parking lot, someone may very easily push aside their shopping cart, put themselves in your rear view mirror, and start giving you hand signals to help you out of a spot. And it's something that's so charming because there are so many situations where, yeah, driving around the cities, the beach towns here, the junky parking lots we have with not enough space, you're someday going to be very thankful that somebody does this for you. And it can be a complete, somebody who is not a parking lot guard, just they happen to be walking by at the time that you were trying to make a U-turn, and people will jump in and help out. If you're in Costa Rica and you want to try it out, I highly recommend it. It's one of the most gratifying small favors that you can do for another person. And if it's a Costa Rican behind the wheel, they're going to completely not be surprised and go with it. You might see Americans and Canadians, I think, who are a little bit more sort of like, what's going on? Why would someone just jump into this situation? But absolutely, if you're in that parking lot and you see someone else struggling and you want to hop in, don't hesitate to do so. Save their back bumper, help them get turned around, and do what you can to pitch in. You definitely see that more often than not, when it comes to cars, Costa Ricans are willing to just pitch in and help out in that small way. Finally, let's get to some phrases. We covered a number in my first video on cultural tips. There are a few I wanted to cover tonight, most of which I want to cover Dios, or God, and how that word comes into Guanacaste and Costa Rican vocabulary very often. So first of all, adios means to God, and that's their way of saying goodbye. Obviously, everybody knows that word. In Costa Rica, one of the common phrases that you heard much more 10 years ago that's actually sort of in its decline, but especially in humbler parts of the country, you hear the phrase, si Dios quiere. Si Dios quiere. That phrase means God willing would be the best simple translation. Literally, it means if God wants it. But they'll add that onto a lot of future hypothetical situations. For example, here it's somewhat arrogant to say just plain, I'll see you in 3 weeks next Friday. I'm sorry, I'll see you in 3 weeks. without adding the phrase si Dios quiere, because it's really sort of an expression of humility and not feeling so cocky that you know in 3 weeks you're going to be there. That's a little extreme way to explain it, but the cultural concept behind it very much has to do with the strong religious tradition in this area. And you would meet people, for example, my host parents in Peace Corps were very willing to suggest to me that I add that onto my speech. All the time I would say, okay, see you when I get back from San Jose, or, I have to go out to Junquillal and then I'll come back. And they'd say, si Dios quiere. And that can be a really nice way if, even if you're not religious and you really don't think any higher power has anything to do with it, here it can be that nice expression of humility that says, yeah, I hope to be in 6 months living in the Bahamas, si Dios quiere, God willing. There's another way to phrase that. You'll also hear people say, si Dios lo permite, si Dios lo permite. Si is if, Dios is God, lo is it's a direct object, and permite is allows it. So you can either say si Dios quiere or si Dios lo permite, and you've tagged on that recognition that none of us are really in control of the universe, and we shouldn't think that we are. Another God-related phrase, Dios guarde, which is a way to express shock. Dios guarde. Off the top of my head, it's tough to come up with the exact, the phrase in English that would be the best translation, but it's sort of Dios guarde. How I can't even come up with a translation. If somebody says, my 4-year-old is super sick with a high fever, Dios guarde is a way to say, oh my goodness, or oh my God, in a polite way. Manny, I absolutely agree. Many of these expressions can also be found in other parts of Latin America. And honestly, what I hope to do is express the fact that these are the phrases used specifically here. And definitely, if you've learned Spanish, you may have learned something correct that is never used here in Guanacaste. You meet people, for example, ordering at a restaurant who use phrases that are not regálame, because in Spanish 101 in college or your high school courses, there was a different phrase for it. And hopefully, if you're listening out there, you'll be able to incorporate these rather than those old phrases in your head from high school. So Dios guarde, oh my God, is another phrase I wanted to cover. Finally, last Dios-related phrase I wanted to share, que Dios les acompañe. It's easier to say it faster, que Dios les acompañe. And the phrase is said when people are leaving, and it's saying, may God be with you. Que Dios les acompañe. May God be with you. And it's a really, if you are not religious, again, there's no reason to think, oh, this person is trying to beat me over the head with their Christian interpretation of the world. They're really just being extremely polite and, trying to do their best to wish you well on your journey. Que Dios les acompañe. Finally, one word that I wanted to touch on that I see a ton of people messing up here, the word tranquilo, which is the best phrase that Guanacastecos would use to say to someone, it's okay, tranquilo. You hear a lot of Americans, and in fact, I did this probably for the first 8 years I was here. always saying está bien or no se preocupe or something a little bit longer. And here in Guanacaste, if somebody has accidentally stepped on your foot or whatever has happened, you can simply say tranquilo, tranquilo, to express no, it's really okay. For the moment, folks, that's about all I have for this evening. My next Wednesday night live chat is our monthly roundup, the last live chat of March. We'll be answering your questions. It's funny that I say we. I will be answering your questions that have been posted over the month of March in the comments on YouTube. So whether you're watching this live and you want to post a question right now, or you're watching the replay, feel free to post it there. I will have my diligent assistant, Danielle Rodriguez, handle that, compile your questions, and next Wednesday night, March 30th, I'll go through them and cover any questions that are pending from the last month. Thank you very much, as always, for joining me. It's been a real pleasure as we talk about Costa Rica culture, restaurants, etc. I'll look forward to giving more information about simple phrases, gestures, etiquette as time goes on. As I mentioned, do be sure to subscribe to my channel so you can stay tuned with all the great news. Thank you very much once again, and have a great evening.